Dear learners, welcome back to the Java learning. And in this video, right, I'm going to explain about the map concept. So the reason is because in the upcoming videos, right, I'm going to do some program only with the help of the map. So before that, right, we need to know, so what is mean by map? So map is like one of the important concept and it will falls under the collection concept in Java. So what is mean by collection? So actually the collection is an interface. So generally, right, whenever we want to store a multiple values, right, we always prefer to use the collection. And what is the advantage of the collection in the sense? Like whenever we try to add a multiple values, right, so its size will grow automatically. Okay, so even if you try to add 100 values, yes, we can able to store 100 values. But you may have the question, like we have an array, right? In an array, we can store a multiple values. Yes, even we have an array, but in an array, we have an restriction. If you remember, like while explaining the program related to the reverse string or like how to remove the duplicate value from the array. So I told one point the size of array is fixed. Okay, so which means you can't add any new value so during the runtime. But whenever we are using this collection interface, right? So we can keep on adding multiple values. So that is the advantage. And in collection interface, like we are having three important interface. So one is of an list interface and set interface and finally the map interface. And in this video, like we are going to deeply discuss upon the map interface. So what is the purpose of the map? So map is nothing but it is a data structure which is used to store like key to value pair. Okay, so what is mean by key to value pair? So let's take an example. Whenever I'm using any of the zip code or pin code, so it should populate the appropriate state. So for example, if I say the zip code it starts with 60, then it should say like it is belong to Tamil Nadu. And whenever I say it is 11, right, it should say it is belong to the Delhi. And how we are going to store this? So generally the 60 is going to act as a key. So whenever the user inject the key 60, it should retrieve the value called as in Tamil Nadu. And whenever the user inject the key called as an 11, right, it should return the value called as in Delhi. Likewise, whenever I say 19, like it should say Leh. And if it is of an 67, right, it should return Kerala. Okay, so generally we are going to store in the key to value pair relation. So we are going to configure the key, and for each and every key, right, we are going to assign some value, and we can utilize those value by injecting the key. And here, right, so as we are storing two things, so one is of an key and value, so we need to always specify so what is the data type of the key to value pair. So in this case, in our case, right, the key is like kind of an integer. Okay, but whereas like the value is in the form of an string, and there may be a other case, so the key may be like kind of an string and the value may be integer, or in other case both the key and value can be string, or in other case, right, both the and value can be the integer. Okay, so whenever like we are creating the map, right, so we need to define like what is the type we are going to store. Okay, so generally like how we are going to do the coding in the sense, like I told the map is an interface. So if you have referred my earliest video, so I have explained like what is mean by interface. So generally, right, we can't create an object for an interface, and we try to implement the interface with the help of the class. So in a map, right, we are having different types of class. Like one is of an HashMap class, and next is of an linked HashMap and TreeMap, and finally like we are having HashTable. Okay, so these are the different types of classes, so which is available in the map. So generally, right, if we need to use the map, so we always implement with the help of the class. So I can write a code in a way. So map, I can give some variable m is equal to new of hash map. Okay, so what I had it, so I have implemented this map interface with the help of the HashMap class. So either we can use in this way, or else right, you can directly create the object for the respective class. I can say so HashMap hm is equal to new of HashMap. Okay, and whenever you are creating an object, either by implementing the class or directly creating the object, right? So as we are going to store the key to value pair, right? So we need to always specify the type. So how we can specify the type, in the sense by adding the lesser than and greater than symbol. So you need to specify the type. So what is the type we are going to store? So for example, if I'm planning to store this relation, right, then the key should be integer, and then right, the value should be in a string. So I need to specify the type. Now let me just convert this as a program so that like you will understand what is the difference between the hash map, linked hash map, tree map, or the hash table. Okay, so now let me just open the IntelliJ. Okay, so in which like let me just try to use the hash map. So I'm just creating the object for the hash map. So even from the suggestion, right, it is asking us to inject the key and value. Okay, so we need to always inject the key and value. So in my case, the key is of an integer and the value is string. And let me give some variable name. Let it be like kind of an hm. Okay, and I need to create an object for the same. I can say new of hash map. I have created an object. And whenever we are using the map interface, right, we can able to do three operation. So one is like, as I told, we can add a multiple values. So whenever we add the multiple values, the size will grow automatically. And how we are going to add a multiple values, in the sense with the help of the put method. Okay, so the put method is used to like add a multiple values. And similar to that, like we are having a method called as an get. I told you like we can retrieve the value based upon the key. So whenever we inject the key in this get method, right, so it is going to return the value. And similar to that, like we are having one another method called as an remove. So whenever we want to remove something, so for example, I have added this key to value pair 11 is equal to Delhi. If I want to remove this, even I can able to remove this with the help of the remove method. Now, as I have created the object, right, so what is the variable name? It is hm. And if I just type hm dot right, I could able to see like the methods, the put method and the get method. So now I need to add a value. So how I am going to add a value? So with the help of the put method, and it is telling us, so the key should be integer and the value should be string, because we have specified the type. Now let me just use the put method, and let me say for 60. So whenever it is a string, right, we should mention in the double quotes, let it be of in Tamil Nadu. And as per Java rule, at the end, right, we should always add a semicolon. Now, let me add a few more things. So whenever I keep on adding, right, so it will add the new values. So we can always use the put method, and with the help of the put method, we can add a multiple values. Let's say I'm just adding a uh, another multiple value. So if it is of an 11, so let it be of Delhi. And similar to that, let me just add a multiple things, because whenever we try to add a multiple things, right, so what happened? So the size will grow automatically. Okay, and let me add one another thing. So hm dot with the help of an put method, right, so let's say if it is of an 67, it is of an Kerala. Okay, now let me try to print this hash map. So how we can print by adding the sysout statement. So the shortcut of adding sysout statement is sysout, and if I just click on enter, and in which if I place the variable name, so always variable holds the value, and if I try to and run this program, right, so now it will print the output. Now let's see so how it is printing the output. If you notice, like as a first step, I have injected the Tamil Nadu, and second, I have injected the Delhi, and third, I have injected the Leh. So, but if you look over the output, right, yes, it is storing in a key to value pair. So, 19 is equal to Leh, 67 is equal to Kerala, and 11 is equal to Delhi. So, fine, that is fine. But if you notice, it is not maintaining the order. So whenever like we use the hash map, right, the point to be remember is like it won't follow the order, which means it will store the values in the random order pair. Okay, so the hash map, right, it always like follow the random order pair. So we can't guarantee the order. Okay, so that is the reason like it is not maintaining the order. And another thing is, right, so whenever we are using the hash map, so the hash map will allow us to store, okay, one null key. Okay, so we can store one null key, but we can store a multiple null value. So for example, right, now if I just try to add like hm dot put, okay, here I'm just adding the null key, and let me just set some value. Let it be like kind of an Mumbai. Okay, so now if I try to rerun the program, right, it will allow us to store the null key. Okay, so that is one another key difference whenever we try to use the hash map. And even it will store us to allow the null values, but here, right, we can use only one null key. So whenever I use the multiple null key, right, and instead of the Mumbai, so let's say I'm just typing as ABC, and if I try to run the program, right, now it will store only one null key, and the latest value will be replaced. So what is the latest value? It is ABC. Obviously the null will store the ABC, but we can have a multiple null values. So for example, instead of a Kerala, if I say null, so for 67, the null will be stored. So I should not mention in the double quotes. Okay. And in the 19, right? So I'm just storing the null value. So here, right, I'm just planning to store multiple null values. So whenever we planning to store a multiple null values, it will allow us to store a multiple null values. Okay. So that is the unique feature which is available in the hash map. Okay, then what about the other map? So we are having something called as an linked hash map. Okay, so now let me just try to use the linked hash map. So for which, right, I'm going to create the object for the linked hash map. And even like in the linked hash map, we need to specify the type. So what we are going to store. So let's say I'm just planning to store the same thing, and let us check the output. So how it is appearing. Okay, so I'm just going to store the integer, and then I'm just going to store a string, and let it be like kind of an linked hash map is equal to, I'm creating the object for the linked hash map. Okay, and whenever we need to add a multiple values, right, so again I should give the variable name called as an LHM dot. I should always use the put method, so where I need to inject the things. So for time being, let me just copy the same thing. Okay, and let me just change the variable name. Okay, so that it will be stored over there. Now let me just try to run this program. So now if I try to run the program, right, the linked hash map will always maintain the injection order. So I forgot to add a sysout statement. So let me just add the sysout statement, and let me just try to run the program. So whenever we use this linked hash map, right? So it will like always maintain the insertion order. Okay, so it won't store in a random order pair. And similar to that, like how the hash map behaves, we can store like one null key and multiple null value. Okay, so now if I look over the output, right? So the first output is like for the hash map. The second output is for the linked hash map. But if you look over this, it is maintaining the injection order. So first part we have added 60. So 60 is equal to Tamil Nadu is stored, 11 is equal to Delhi is stored, 19 is equal to LA is stored. It is maintaining the injection order and it is allowing us to store like one null key and the latest value will be get stored. Okay, and even here, right, we can have a multiple null value. Okay, so here it will always maintain the injection order. So whenever you want to maintain the not an injection or insertion order, so whenever you're planning to do that, right, so we can use the linked hash map. Okay, so now this is fine and we are having one more thing called as a tree map. Okay, so even in the tree map, right, we are going to like store multiple values, but let's see how it work. Now let me just create the object for the tree map. So whenever we need to use one class in the other class, right, so we should always create an object. So I'm just creating an object and here I'm just specifying the type. So let the type be the integer and the string, and let me give some variable name tm is equal to, I'm creating the object with the help of the new keyword, so new of tree map. Okay, so now this is done. Now, right, so whenever I need to add, so I should use the put method. Now let me simply copy paste the same. Okay, and then let me just change the variable name. So the variable name is tm, right? So I can say tm dot put, and let me add a print statement and let me check how it behaves. Okay, so now if I add this out statement and if I print this tm, right, and if I run the program, okay, here the key advantage is like this tree map follows the natural ordering. Okay, so natural ordering is nothing but like it will print the output in the ascending order. And another thing is like we can't use null key. So the tree map won't store null key. So no null key is allowed, but we can have null value. Okay, and always whenever you're using the map, right, the key should be unique. So now if I run the program, it is throwing the error. So why it is throwing the error? It is throwing the null point exception because in the tree map I'm trying to store a null key, so it won't allow the null key. So now let me just remove the null key and let me just rerun the program. Okay, so whenever we are planning to store a null key, right, it will throw the exception. Now if you notice, it is sorting the things. So if the natural sorting means the ascending order, as per ascending order 11, 19, 60 and 67. And in case if I mention the string, right, so let me uh, do with the one another program. Okay, so let it be like tm1, and this time, right, I'm just planning to store the key as a string. Okay, and then value as an integer. Okay, and one more thing is like it will always do the natural sorting only for the key and not for the value. Okay, and this time, right, I'm just going to add a multiple values. So in order to add a multiple values, I always use the put method, and let me add. Okay, if it is of an Delhi, it should be 11. Okay, or else like let me add one more thing. So ltm dot, if I just add the put method, and if it is of an lay, right, if the key is lay, then the value should be at 19. And similar to that, like let me add one more thing. So tm1 dot put, that is a variable name, and let me just store something. Okay, let it be like kind of Tamil Nadu, and let me just add the code as a sys. Now, right, if I try to add a sysout statement, and if I print this LTM1, and if I try to run the program, so now the natural sorting will apply to the key. So even if it is of an if the key is of a numerical value or the string, right, the natural sorting will be applied. So as per ascending order, Delhi will be the first, Leh will be the second, and Tamil Nadu will be the third. And we can't store the null key, but it will allow us to store a null value. For example, here, right, in Tamil Nadu, if I set a null and if I try to run, right, so it will allow me to store the null value. Okay, so whenever, right, we are using the like tree map, so no null key is allowed, but we can store a null value. But the key difference is like it will do the natural sorting. Now the final thing is like hash table. So what is the key difference? So even in the hash table, right? So it will maintain no order. So it will always store the value in random order pair. But the key difference is like it won't allow us to store no null key or value. Okay, so we can't store like any of the null value. So now for the better understanding, let me just create the program. Let me create the object for the hash table, and let me just specify the type. Okay, so let the key be the string and the value be the integer, and let me just give the variable name as like ht is equal to, I'm creating an object, so new of hash table. Okay, so now this is done. So now how we can add a multiple values with the help of the put method. Let me just copy paste the above code, and let me just change the variable name alone, because we need to add only with the help of the put method. And whenever we are using the put method, right, so the size will be grown automatically. Now if I try to like print this hash table, right, obviously it will throw the null point exception, because we have some null value, because it won't allow us to store the null thing, right? So it is throwing the error. Where it is throwing the error in the line number 40, 49, because we are having the null value. So now let me just have some value for it, and let me make the key as null. So even if I make the key as null, and if I try to run, right, so it will throw the error, because even it won't allow us to store a null key. Okay, so we can't store a null value or null key whenever we are using the hash table. And let me just print now let me change the null value, and let me try to run the program, and let's check the output. So obviously the output will be in a random order pair. Okay, even here it is not maintaining the insertion order, it is not following the natural sorting, which is nothing but the ascending order. So similar to the like tree map, right, like this hash table will behaves. Okay, so this is how like we will be adding the multiple values. So nowadays, like in an interview, they started to ask, so what is the difference between the hash map and the linked hash map and the tree map and the hash table? So whenever they ask the difference, right, you can tell. So everything is like used to add a multiple values, and we are going to add multiple values with the help of the put method. But the key difference is like the hash map will maintain the random order pair, but the linked hash map, right, it will maintain the insertion order. And tree map, right, it always follow the natural ordering, which is nothing but it will sort by ascending order. And even in the hash table, like it will maintain the random order pair. And another key difference is like in the hash map and the linked hash map, we can have one null key, and we can have a multiple null value. But when it comes to the tree map, right, so no null key is allowed, but we can have a multiple null value. But when it comes to the hash table, right, so we can't store any of the null key or the null value. So these are the key differences. So like hope this video has given you an idea about the map. So similar to that, I can give an few example about the list and set in the upcoming videos, or else I have already uploaded like few videos related to the collection interface. I will add the link over here so you can just refer whenever needed. Okay, and keep supporting my channel, so and keep learning as well, and all the best for your interview preparation.